Hi guys, this is the chapter one lecture over in our sociology book, the sociological perspective and research process. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through this PowerPoint. This will also be uploaded um, in our week two. Um, Okay, so as I said, this is chapter one, the sociological perspective and research process. And these are some questions. Do you ever just sit around and watch other people? I used this example in one of my classes the other day that I'm on the third floor, and to get down to the second floor, I have to go down to the second floor to go to the bathroom because there isn't a bathroom on the third floor. And I love to just watch all of the students as they go by, and I'm kind of a people watcher. How do we get information from people while we protect their privacy at the same time? And this has to do with sociological research. Can we ever ask the perfect question in a survey? So there is something that we are trying to get the answer to when we do research. And surveys are just one of the ways that we can do that. But how do you know which questions to ask to get the right answers or the answers that you feel will be most beneficial to your research? So, what is sociology? The systematic study of human society and social interaction. That's all it is. Theoretical perspectives and research methods are applied. And we have a lot of different theorists, and they kind of somewhat overlap with psychology. So you might have heard some of these before if you've had other classes with that, but there's also some new ones, I'm sure. Sociologists study how human behavior is shaped by group life and how group life is affected by individuals. So it not only looks at it's not a micro study per se. It's a more of a macro type of situation. So we look at what impact a certain society has on an individual and how that individual in turn makes an impact on that society. So I use the example in one of my classrooms that we can have one of our students that's from, let's say, Georgia, and we're in Northeast Oklahoma. So what kind of effect is that student? What is he going to bring from his culture and his background into our classroom? We also have a couple of classes that have students from Italy. So what are they going to bring into our classroom and how will our classroom affect them? So sociology is used in health and human services and business communication, academia, and law. And sociologists are everywhere. And even if you are not a sociologist, that title, um, sociology is something that we can use in everyday life. It's very beneficial in many different areas. So in the book, one of the studies that was used in there was a study over social media and teen bullying and suicide crisis. So these are just a few of the questions that they had. Suicide primarily occurs in high income nations of the world. That is false. Suicide occurs everywhere. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. That's true. More than twice as many suicides occur in the United States each year as there are suicides. So, what they're saying is the United States has twice as many suicides than all of them. So, that is true. So, we have a very high suicide rate. Although females are more likely to attempt suicide, males are more likely to complete suicide. Is that true or false? That is true. And the reasoning behind that is that most males use, um, I guess you could call it more deadly force. They tend to use firearms or um, things that usually do the intended job that they want to get done. And women use things that are more passive, such as poisons. Each year, about 500,000 suicide deaths occur worldwide. That is false. Firearms are the most commonly used method of suicide among males and females. That is true. Among males, the US suicide rate is highest for men 65 and older. That is true. And a lot of the speculation is that men this age tend to, their health may, be declining. They may have certain issues. They don't feel as productive. There are a lot of different situations for men in this age bracket that makes them more common, to try to attempt suicide. The prevalence of suicide attempts typically is highest each year among adults between the ages of 18 and 25. That is true. So why should you study sociology? A society is a large social grouping that shares the same geographic territory and is subject to the same political authority, dominant cultural expectations. So one of the examples is the campus of NEO. So we all might be from different, geographical locations. We may be all from different cultural cultures, but for now, we are all in the same geographical territory and we're all ruled by the same authority figures. So an example of this, is that one of the sports teams had an outbreak of COVID, and the coach wanted them to all stay isolated. Well, the head of the college, that's not that's not what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that if you are positive, you stay quarantined. If you do not test positive, then you have to wear a mask and go to class. So the authority figure of NEO overrides, say, this coach or, everybody else. So we're all subject to the same political authority in this case. And the dominant cultural expectations are one of what you would expect on a college campus. So do you think every college student should be required to take sociology courses? Some may say no, that I'm wasting my money on it, that I'm just ticking my box to take this course, and I totally understand that. But part of going to college is they want you to be well-rounded, and being able to learn about other cultures and how they affect us and how we affect other people is something, as one of the slides put, it's very beneficial to many different occupations. And so um, being able to learn about the world and how you affect the world is something it's good to learn about. So why should you study sociology? The sociological imagination is the ability to see the relationships between individual experiences and the larger society with personal troubles and public issues. So one of the exercises we did in class is, why do you drink tea? So there are many reasons people drink tea. So people may drink tea because they like it. They may drink tea because it's healthy. They may drink tea because it has a lot of caffeine in it and it's going to keep them awake for the next class. Um, it may be cultural. You do it within, your circle of your family and your culture. There are a lot of different reasons why people drink tea. We had one of the groups use an example of why do people have pets. So we got the whole thing of, we have pets because we don't want to be alone. We want to care for something, we want to be a part of something that's bigger than ourselves, and be responsible for somebody, more than just ourselves. And we had two actually groups that did the same one. And one of them used their sociological imagination and said, we use them for tax write-offs and we use them for food. So I thought that was very interesting because most of the class was appalled about, the food part, because I think we automatically, in this situation, when you're not using your imagination, you're thinking about dogs and cats and, rats or snakes or whatever. But we are on the NEO campus, and it's a very large agricultural school. So school started on Monday. Immediately, all of the horses started appearing in the pastures and the fields and the barns. And if you look at it in terms of that, some of those animals, I'm sure, are a great tax write-off. Or also kids who are in 4-H, they raise their pigs or they raise their cows and they show them and then they eat them. So I think that's an example of using your sociological imagination to discover, not just the, okay, let's use this narrow view. We need to broaden it. And that's what this is trying to get us to do. So global sociological imagination allows us to see the rapidly changing world, and that's examining the high, middle, and low income countries. So we are going to take a look at that. And it's like the high income they're going to use is New York, the low income is Congo, and the middle income is China. So there are a lot of different factors about income that go into these different areas. So using our global sociological imagination to understand suicide, we look at income and gender disparities. And in higher income countries, the rate of male suicide is 3 times that of women. And we have to wonder, why is that? And as we've discussed, male suicides in a higher income society may be that there is, they have more income, but they also feel more pressure to succeed. And when they don't, they don't feel like their life is worth living. In the United States, the rate of male suicides is almost 4 times that of women. And in lower middle income countries, the rate of male suicides is 1.5 times that of women. So in lower and middle income countries, you can use your imagination and think, well, why is that? Well, maybe they don't have as much stress to succeed, or maybe lower income countries, they don't have time to sit around and think about the things that are wrong that they need to, they do what they can to survive. We look at the age group difference, and in many nations, the highest rate of suicide is that of persons ages 70 and over. In the United States, the highest rate of suicide is that of the middle-aged persons, who particularly are white, non-Hispanic men. And as we discussed, why are non-Hispanic, it's non-Hispanic when, why are Hispanic men excluded? And we talked about the fact that, if you're Hispanic culture, that a lot of those people are more family oriented, and they feel the responsibility to take care of not, themselves and their immediate families, but extended family as well. They may feel like, people are relying on me. The risk factors, difficulties in accessing healthcare, easy availability of suicide, certain medications, firearms, pesticides, sensationalized media, which I think that has, it goes into a lot of factors in that younger age group that we see. Sometimes it's glorified. The stigma against persons who seek help for suicidal or mental abuse, substance abuse problems. That's one of the things in our society, especially, we're just now coming to realize that mental health is just as important as physical health. And if you have, poor mental health, you can often have poor physical health. And it's often a stigma if you say, I'm not doing great. And I think especially with males, that kind of goes into play there. So as an industrial revolution swept through the United States beginning at the 19th century, children working in factories became increasingly common. So social thinkers began to explore the new social problems brought about by industrialization. Another way to think about it is, how has the age of social media brought about new problems? So while, people at the beginning of the 19th century were examining industrialization, in our time, we could think about, well, what has social media and brought into, how has that brought problems in our society? The development of sociological thinking. Industrialization is the process of which societies are transformed from dependence on agriculture and handmade products to an emphasis on manufacturing and related industries. And that was at the beginning of the 19th century. It exploded everywhere. And they were not just dependent on, farms and agriculture and, making their own goods. We had, an industrialization boom. Urbanization is the process by which an increasing proportion of the population lives in cities rather than in rural areas. And I know right now where we are located, we are in a rural area, but we see just as much urbanization here, maybe not as, much as some places like New York City or Chicago or certain places like that, as it just sprawls out. But we do see more of that than we used to. So these are going to be, we're going to go through the theorists quickly here. And like I said, some of these people you might already know. Auguste Comte coined the term sociology. He was one of the earliest sociologists. He is considered the founder of sociology. So you need to remember that. He believed in positivism, and it's the belief that they can best be understood through scientific inquiry. So the belief is that you can find out more through inquiry of scientific discoveries. That's how he thought that you could find out what you need to know. Harriet Martineau was a British sociologist that translated Comte's work. So until recently, of course, she received no recognition for her work, and that is mainly because she was a female in a male-dominated society. So we find this a lot as we go back into these different areas, that were so many women that were just as important as men, but they weren't recognized. So we are recognizing them now. So she wrote Society in America in 1837. And she was also an advocate for racial and gender equality, which is huge at that time. So yay to Harriet. Herbert Spencer, did Andy looking dude. Social Darwinism is the belief that those species of animals best suited to their environment would survive and prosper. So it's basically like the theory of evolution, and those that were the best would succeed. He believed that societies developed through the process of struggle and fitness, which he referred to as survival of the fittest. So if you're strong in that environment, you're going to succeed. If you're one of the weaker ones, you're going to be weeded out. And that was his belief. Emil Durkheim, he wrote Rules of Sociological Method. Social facts are patterned ways of acting, thinking, and feeling that exert social control over each person. Yep, that's a lot of typos right there, but that's how it goes. Okay. Anomie is a condition where social culture control becomes ineffective due to the loss of shared values and a sense of purpose in society. So he felt like things kind of went off the rails when people don't respect, what's going on, and they don't have shared values anymore. That everybody starts almost thinking on their own, that we're not all, thinking the same. He felt that that's the sense of purpose in society was gone once that started happening. He stressed to people that people are the product of their social environment, and that he was the one of the founding figures of the functionalist theoretical tradition. Karl Marx, he stressed class conflict. So he believed it was necessary to produce social change, and that would help make it a better society for social change to happen. Class conflict is a struggle between the working class, which was the proletariat, and the capitalist class, which is the bourgeoisie. So basically between the rich and the poor. He is regarded as one of the most profound sociological thinkers. And many believe that his theory places too much emphasis on class and not enough on race and gender. He basically, that was how he saw society, as class, the uppers and the lowers, and he didn't look at much else. So that was his view in sociological context. Max Weber. He was concerned about the changes brought about by the Industrial Revolution. So how things changed, which, everything was industrialized and everybody did they did it this way now, and they moved away from the rural. He felt that was a big concern. He emphasized that sociology should be value free, and that meant that they didn't put their personal issues into it, that none of that mattered. It was just it was based on this. Doesn't matter what your viewpoint is, this is what it is. He was concerned with large-scale corporations, with the bureaucracy of the large-scale corporations. And he believed that national bureaucracy rather than class struggle was most significant factor in determining class. So you'll notice as they grow from the very beginning of the theorists, as you're going down, they each change a little bit. and he was more concerned about, the Industrial Revolution and the struggles with not class struggle, but the other struggles that came along with the industrialization. So George Simmel, he was a German sociologist, and he focused on how society is a web of pattern interactions among people, and he called it the geometry of life. And he took into account the group size and its social interactions. So he felt that there were different, that the makeup of a gathering, so you have two people, the makeup of two people gathering is much different than the three-person gathering, or is much different than the makeup of, an entire room gathering. He felt like that the geometry of life, of the different patterned interactions, that was what we were supposed to be examining. And if you kind of think about each of these theorists, some of their things you're going, I don't see that. But like I said, they kind of evolve. And if you look at it and almost put it all together, they all have really good viewpoints about things. And all of it might not work for you, but I think they gradually start to, examine different areas. And when you put it all together, it works really nicely. So the origins of sociology in the United States, it came to the United States in the 1890s. The University of Chicago had the first department of sociology, and the American Sociological Society. So the University of Chicago actually had, so they had research departments where they could bring people in and they could do sociological research. They could, they could have individual people come in and they could do these large scale, research projects that hadn't been done before. So they were set up to do that in the United States. And the American Sociological Society was developed shortly after that in America. So Jane Addams. Jane Addams is like amazing. She's my social work woman. She was one of the best known women early sociologists. She founded Hull House. She's awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her work with the poor. And Hull House was one of the original community houses, and where people who they were poor and they didn't have anywhere to stay, and she ran these places for people who needed to go somewhere. And this was like the beginning of the social work era that she contributed to that in huge ways. W.E.B. Du Bois, he founded the second department of sociology at the Atlanta University, and his classic work was The Philadelphia Negro, a Social Study, and that was based on a study done in Philadelphia about the different aspects of being both Black and being an American, and how that rubbed together. And he was the first person to decide that, he's the first scholar to note that a dual heritage, what he called it, creates conflict for people of color, and it's called double consciousness. So it's not just you're Black, it's not just you're an American, that you have that dual. And we know that now that we have all sorts of dualities, or somebody, you're a woman when you're also a Black woman, you're an educated Black woman, there are so many labels to so many different people. And he was one of the first individuals to bring this up for people of color. So theoretical perspectives in the 20th and 21st century. Theory is a set of logical interrelated statements that attempts to describe, explain, and predict social events. Functional perspectives is based on the assumption that society is a stable, orderly system. Talcott Parsons was the most influential advocate of the functional perspective. All societies must meet social needs in order to survive. So yeah, balance must be maintained in the home, and institutions such as school, church, government must support the families in preserving the system. So they believed that the man was the head of the household. It was his responsibility to have the job, be the strong one of the family, give all of that you would think is typical male. He believed that the male had to be, that had to be his job. He had his, his job that he was supposed to do, the wife of the family or the mother of the family. It was her job basically to take care of the husband, give him support, take care of the children, make sure the house was taken care of. It's kind of that, I don't know, that Leave It to Beaver 50s style of household. That's kind of what he believed. If you didn't have that in the home, um, you weren't able to preserve the family system. And if you didn't have the schools and the churches and the government supporting the families, making sure that they looked at it, they viewed it the same way as this, if they didn't all work together, then there was dysfunction and there were problems. So Robert Merton, he refined functionalism and he distinguished between manifest and latent functions. So manifest functions are attended or overtly recognized by the participants in the social unit. The latent functions are unintended functions that aren't, you don't know, you don't realize that they're there. They're hidden and remain unacknowledged by the participants. So that's the things that happen underneath that nobody's really aware of. So the conflict perspective argues that groups in society are engaged in a continuous power struggle for the control of the scarce resources. So these are each of these are going to be theoretical perspectives that I'm giving. The macro level, like I said, macro means large. So it's an approach that examines whole societies, large scale social structures and social systems. And micro level looks at smaller scale individuals, small groups. So macro big, micro is small. The symbolic interactionist perspective argues the society is the sum of interactions of individuals or groups. Postmodern perspective argues that existing theories have been unsuccessful in explaining social life. And they're just saying, screw you guys, it didn't happen that way. This is how we're going to do it. So unsuccessful explaining social life in contemporary societies. So, which are characterized by post-industrialization, consumerism, and global communication. So that's more of a now time. It's the fairly new postmodern perspective. All the rest are cruddy, and we're going to say it's from this. They have a totally different viewpoint. So which theoretical perspective do you think best explains society? So I'm going to say the same thing. I think that you can take bits and pieces from each of these and you put them all together and it works really nicely together. Sometimes I think they battle against each other, and some of their things you're going, and some of them you're going, I get that. Somebody else will go, I don't like that part, but I do like this part. I always tend to, same thing with the theorists, I kind of like pick and choose and it all goes together. But that's just you might see it in a totally different way. So the sociological research process, there are many different terms here. I'm going to try to get through. Quantitative research is based on the goal of scientific objectivity. It focuses on data that is measured numerically. So when you think of quantitative research, think of the quantity, the number. Qualitative research focuses on underlying meanings and patterns. So when you think of qualitative research, think of the quality. So one's numbers, one's the quality of it. And just if you keep those two different, they're those different types of research. So this is basically a scientific, this is a research method. And these are the ones, if you're, doing the classic or they're inclusive, these are the different methods. You can look this up in your book. And it's very, informational, the different routes that people take for research. So the sociological research process goes on. We have hypothesis, variable, independent variable, dependent variable, validity, and reliability. So basically the hypothesis is a statement that you expect a certain relationship between two or more variables. A variable is a measurable trait or characteristic, and that may change from one situation to another situation, from one person to another person. The independent variable is presumed to be the cause of the relationship. The dependent variable is assumed to be caused by the independent variable. So you can see the difference of the cause and the caused. The validity is whether or not the measurements that you're using are accurately measuring what you want them to, and that you're able to get the right, the right information out of that. Reliability is the extent to which a study or a research instrument yields consistent results. So the instrument you're using, whether it's a survey or there are so many, there's surveys, there are in-person things, there are different experiments, anything that you're using to get this outcome has to be reliable. This is the hypothesized relationship between variables for suicide. So you can read this in your book also. It just shows, the causal relationship, the inverse causal relationship, the multiple cause explanation. So we look at all the different things as to why the rate of suicide is different in the United States or worldwide. So understanding statistical data. So this is a firearms death for males and females. And this is basically they're telling you what the rate is for males with firearms homicide, males with suicide, firearm related death. So you can just see the differences in those. And there are a lot of different statistical data that will be difficult to understand. And this is just very basic, but they want you to be able to read basic statistical data. And it's very helpful. Research methods are specific strategies or techniques for systematically conducting research. A survey is a poll. The researcher uses to gather facts to find the relationships among different facts. A questionnaire, I think you've all seen questionnaires before. It's a research instrument. That's what they consider it. Has a series of questions that participants respond to. And interviewing, researcher asks you questions to get those answers and they record those answers. Secondary analysis uses existing data that has been collected from someone else. Content analysis examines cultural artifacts or different forms of communication, and it extracts thematic material and data to conclusions that you want to give out different types of social life. Participant participation is collecting observations while being part of the group that you're studying. So you might be part of the group, but you're also observing and you're studying what's going on. Ethnography is a detailed study of groups of people. So it's not just one, but say the researcher wants to study an Amazonian tribe. So they go and they stay with the tribe. The ethnography is that detailed study of a group of people. So this is the national suicide statistics at a glance for our different areas. Yeah, some of these are pretty high, and it's one of the things as a researcher people look at is, well, why is it higher in these areas compared to some of these over here? And that's what you do when you do sociological research. They're just whatever I want to know why this happened in this area, not this area. So this is what you would find out after you did the research. You would have something to examine, such as this. So an experiment is a carefully designed scientific procedure that you want to test your hypothesis and demonstrate a known fact. An experimental group is the group that is exposed to the independent variable. The control group is the group that they are not exposed to a variable. So let's say we want to see if Mountain Dew makes you hyper or more jittery. So you'll give the experimental group, let's give them a whole bunch of Mountain Dew. The control group, they don't get the Mountain Dew. And then you look at both of those groups, and then you make a correlation as to whether Mountain Dew makes these people hyper and jittery more so than the control group. And that's how you get your information. So, and you can decide whether the two variables are associated by more frequently than you could by chance. So the ethical issues of sociological research, there are many. You have to have people, they have to fill out forms. You have to make sure you're taking care of them. If you're doing a study about suicide, the last thing you want to do is have a question someone who has attempted suicide and upset them or cause harm to them all over again. So you have to make sure that you safeguard your participants. You have to have their right to privacy and dignity, and you have to protect them from, any harm. You have to protect their confidential information. You have to maintain objectivity. So if you're doing research on something that, tugs at your heartstrings or something that you're really interested in, you still have to maintain objectivity and integrity when you disclose your findings, and you can't get involved. That's one of the things about doing sociological research. You have to research objectively, and even if it's something that's near and dear to you, you have to make sure that you adhere to these ethical issues. And you have to acknowledge any kind of research that you're done with someone else, or you're being paid by someone else to do research for them. So I think that's it. So I'm going to stop the screen share. That was a lot of stuff to get over. I'm glad that you guys have one of these a week and you don't have to watch me for too long. So I'm going to say, read your chapters, read your chapter. Make sure you go into week 2 and step by step do each thing that you're supposed to do for each week. Don't wait until the last minute. We have a discussion post that is due, and you have a module 1 quiz. So make sure you get your discussion in before Wednesday at midnight, and you respond back to someone before Friday at midnight. And your module quiz will also be open, and that will be over chapter 1. So don't just look at this or have me on in the background. If you want to, that's fine, but you're going to get the most information by reading your chapter and reviewing the PowerPoint if you need to. So if you need anything else, just email me, and I will see you guys next week.